haven't sort of seen each other for a few days or talked with each other, rather. And yeah, we're just picking back up from last time. And James, you've had an interesting few days, mate.
Yeah. Well, haven't had a meal for 3 days, so it's all good, man. I mean, I just spent $175 on a project to do some prototyping. So I was happy to go without food at the end of the month, you know. And then these pervachy people in Romania just threw it all back in my face, you know. And they I think they're sending my project back to the US or something. It's just super annoying, man, because I spent, you know, I made the sacrifice, and then you just get draconian pervachy, and like, what's the justification? Is that they believe that they say they needed a confirmation, but you know, it's funny how people are just inventing the rules for themselves these days. Do you see what I mean? They're just
totally. It
just
sounds...
inventing just think that you have to understand them because they're in authority, and I've paid for a service, you know. They just invented this thing like, oh, we needed a confirmation, but I'd already emailed them and all this other crap. Anyway, look, I don't want to talk about these faggots, but yeah. I looked it up because they fucked me over. I looked it up, and there was them. What it worked out is like Romania is like one of the Demolay nations, and Demolay is like a youth recruitment agency for basically faggot masonry, and yeah, they're active in Romania, France, Italy, and Germany, and also Australia. I noticed, and the other thing that I noticed, is that Romania was a big oil producer in Europe, and I didn't realize that. I didn't realize also how much of an oil producer the UK was. I didn't realize that Russia was up there with Saudi Arabia as like the global top.
Yes, because
all this money stuff.
Russia basically, I remember reading years ago that Russia had basically set up a big oil line, and there's a big oil line to the west, I think, through, was it Afghanistan or Kazakhstan or something like that? And basically, yeah, they said, oh man, I read this ages ago. It's just coming back to me. And yeah, there was just this big shitstorm about a big sort of Russian oil line right to the west, basically. Yeah. And they basically set up all of this oil after the fall of the old communist sort of regime, when they first brought Putin in and stuff like that. So they set that infrastructure up at that time from the late 80s onwards.
Okay, yeah.
And yeah,
I think that the oil is, you know, one of the big sort of.
You know who else has got a shit ton of oil as well that's keeping quiet about it? America, the US.
Yeah.
Because this whole sort of peak oil theory is a whole heap, it's another lie. You know, the albiotic or albigenic sort of Russian sort of theory about oil being more the blood of the earth that constantly replenishes makes more sense, actually. And
well, yeah, there's the deep hot biosphere theory, and then there's the fossil fuel theory, and then there's the abiotic theory as well.
That's what I was talking about.
Yeah, there's several theories about how oil is created.
Well, the thing is that in America, all these supposed sort of oil mines that supposedly dried up many decades ago, they're all full back of oil again, but they just shut up about it.
Really? Yeah. I remember reading some of the industry analysis about how, you know, they're not running out of oil, they're running into oil. Yes. They're having so many new discoveries. I mean, not that I think that we should be burning oil as fuel. I don't think that we should be burning oil as fuel.
Pervachy sort of mentality of using scarcity to make people scramble, you know?
Yeah, that's the hook. At the end of the day, is scarcity. I mean,
yeah, it's an illusion.
Yeah, scarcity in Spanish is set. So it's that old thing about Satan again. You know, the
well, isn't it interesting? I
limit.
found out that Set in the whole Egyptian sort of Draco sort of bullshit story, that was identity hijacked from Haru in Australia.
I see.
So we've got a whole other angle of identity hijacking going on here, because all of the Egyptian stuff, the primary Egyptian stuff, the Medjays and stuff like that, the first pharaonic dynasties, well, that was all Magyar. And they got chased out by Arabs. The Medjays got chased out by Arabs. But they all spoke Australian, right? They all spoke Magyar. And basically it says on the carry-on walls that the trademark bone was actually commissioned from Australia to build the Giza pyramid in the first place. Because on the Giza pyramid, that same trademark bone is there. I think on the 9th step, as you go into the base of the Giza pyramid, on the 9th step up, there is that actual symbolic bone, but it is diagonally pointing in the different direction from how it is in the south, because that's how it's meant to be.
Okay. I don't know about a connection.
It's like recreating sort of like an Australia sort of situation in Egypt in the first place. And so basically it's the same old story. The Magyars in Egypt get hijacked, but all the information, the original Egyptian information, was based on Australian Aboriginal Dreamtime stuff, okay?
Could be. I mean, I can't really say about a connection to Australia, but I obviously know that there's a connection between Egypt and India via this.
Well, the thing is,
Horn of Africa, the Horn of Africa kingdom called Punt, and then Axum, and then this became Abyssinia and Ethiopia.
Well, this is relatively new information for most people, because they say Set was a jackal, right? Okay.
So you're going to say he was a kangaroo?
Yeah, but it was it's a kangaroo, and the name is Haru in Australia. So it's yet another earlier sort of form of identity hijacking, because literally we have this same crime blueprint literally all over the fucking world, where basically the Magyars basically establish everything.
Yeah, it's a criminal fingerprint. That's a good way to put it. It's like it's a methodology. It's a methodology of pervachy and black magic, and
well, you look at all of it. You look at the Egyptian history, the Phoenician history. Okay, the original Phoenicians were according to Attila Flink, and he was extremely knowledgeable about the Phoenicians in particular. And he used to say that the Phoenicians were the naval branch of the Magyars, okay? And from that sort of...
The Magyars, obviously, for English speakers, are the people that we call the Magi.
Yeah, look, they can be Magyar or Mazar in Korea. There's been so many transliterations of the Magyar, depending on the spelling and the language and all the rest of it.
Or Nazarene.
Yes, even Nazar. I've got this Hungarian sort of very knowledgeable Hungarian that's basically been feeding me all the terms. I'll keep his name silent for now. But yeah, we've got all the terminology for all the Magyar civilizations worldwide now. It's just ridiculous, from...
So how do you see this ancient Magi civilization, which was based on the humans and the angels, or Elohim, Nephilim? How do you see that as being gradually taken over by the pervachy and by the reptilians?
Well, to me, it's like you've got the same crime blueprint in every civilization in the history that we've been given, okay? In what to analyse and sort of look at and wonder about. And it is this same crime blueprint everywhere. Like in the original Sumerians were Magyars, and then the original Sumeria before Mesopotamia was actually in Australia at the same place next to Carrion, like at Kangiangi, as you'd say it in English, which means Sumerian kingdom, and that's where all the gold was.
I see.
And basically, the pervachy were keeping Australia as its secret private stash during these times, like in Egyptian times, Persian times, Greek times, the whole lot of it, you know. And it was actually when Ramses II, who was the younger brother of Khufu, and Khufu was actually a female who pretended to be the king and got away with it for about 20 years in Egypt. Then she came to Australia to do the right thing and bring back medicines and a whole heap of stuff like that, because Egypt was dying at the time, okay? It was in a really bad way. And she wanted to basically...
So what kind of year is this? I mean, I do appreciate everything that you're saying, obviously, but I mean, there's a whole other take on Egypt, which is that the pyramids, such as the Khufu and Cheops pyramid, were not actually built by the later Egyptians. And again, we've got this.
Oh, sure. But I'm just looking at one very important story that was a very significant pivotal point of basically Khufu tried to do the right thing, and what she wanted to do, it's a very important story, was bring back the chief medicine man from here, a dude named Duddy, okay? And he came from sort of like the mouth of the Darling and Murray rivers, which is a very, very significant point in the landscape of Australia, okay, in the sense of it's actually between Brisbane and Uluru in the centre of Australia. Well, they're the two ovaries.
Okay, yeah, the Gold Coast.
So you've got the original Kadisha, where the actual centre point of that Kadisha is actually at literally the mouths of where the Murray and Darling River meet in Australia, down in Victoria. It is so significant. And that's where I've got the magnetic gold sand from, right from that spot, okay?
I see.
And it's very, very powerful sort of energy too. And it's like, I think I sent you a video on Skype, I may not have, about that particular line that runs down from Bairnsdale to Bali.
Oh, yeah, I've seen this, yeah.
Yes, so this all connects with that, and also the first language as well in that area too, and the whole connection between the Mudgers and the Australian Aboriginal tribes here, okay?
What I thought that was very interesting about what you said about this Magi of Australia in particular, Ugar, as you said, and I thought it was. Do you remember I showed you on the map? Ugar is obviously related to the word Wagga Wagga, and Wagga Wagga, if you look at it on the map, there's a place next to it called Bulgari, it's in Bulgar, which is another name for the Magyars in Asia.
That is that's a very good point, James. And then you've got to ask.
There's more because
okay, just while I got you there, you've got to ask the question: where did the name occur first, here in Australia or up in Bulgaria? Because the same can be said about Tafra down the New South Wales south coast and Bega, and then you go up to Transylvania, Romania, and you say, well, okay, which one came first, the one in Europe or the one in Australia? Sorry, the one in Australia.
Well, I mean, there are two in Eurasia, aren't there? Because there's the Bulgaria on the Black Sea next to Romania.
Yep.
Romania, the bane of my life. And then there's also, but Bulgar is of course the name of the Volga River, and the Volga River is a very important Hunnic place in Eurasia in terms of them coming over from the original homeland, which is what they used to call Turan, the origin of the Turanian people, which is to the east of the Caspian Sea, and then they're coming over into this region where you've got Chuvashia and Mariel, and this Udmurtia, is it? I can't remember exactly, and Tatarstan Tatarstan, and these are the Russian republics, federated Russian republics. But you can see they're doing the slow kill on them as well, because they now, what's it, Putin administration, almost like a one-party state there, has taken away the presidencies of all of these 21, or is it 22 now, that they've taken Crimea of the Ukraine, federated Russian republics. And I think there's one, Tatarstan, which is also in this Volga area. And if you look in Turkish, I think Volga is actually called Bulgar in Turkish. But you obviously know very well the games that they play with the spellings and with the words.
Oh yes, yeah,
and
the dialect interchange to sort of hide certain things. And we've discussed this sort of thing over the years. We just keep on coming across it left, right, and centre, because one crack appears, all the rest start to appear. You know, it's just a matter of observation. The devil's in the detail, as the old saying goes. So yeah, we have to approach this whole situation as a massive crime investigation.
And didn't you say there were Phoenician castles in Australia? And
yes,
Ottoman Turkish castles and Tartarian things like that.
Oh yeah, I've got another friend at the moment that's really researching hardcore into the architecture in Australia, in particular Sydney, and he's coming across all this sort of Gothic, Hungarian, Phoenician, Turkish sort of architecture all over the place. Wow. And one thing about Australia is that right up to a certain point in the 19th century, Britain only owned the east coast of Australia, that was all generally called New South Wales, right?
Oh, I see, yeah.
Okay. And the rest of Australia was still owned by the Dutch, okay?
Right.
Because the Dutch had a big job of clearing out all the mudgers from Indonesia and those sorts of places, you know, like
so you're talking about what kind of clearing out? I mean, you're talking massacres, you're talking the smallpox,
yes,
disease, infections. What kind of clear outs are we talking about?
Well, Attila talked about one specific clear out in Bali, where there's 26,000 Mudger graves in one specific location in Bali.
Okay.
Yeah, and he said basically the Dutch were responsible for that.
So that was a massacre.
Yeah, it's a massacre. Lots of massacres, and this has been done in a very underhanded way. And this has all been planned by, on talking with our Bengali man researcher, they've done a big plan in the Americas, Australia and Europe to basically, like, they wiped out all the black people and mulattoes and Moors and all that sort of thing out of Europe, okay, and whitewashed it. And then they did the reverse process in the Americas, where, say, for instance, when the Spanish came to South America, there were at least 50 white, 50 white tribes.
Yeah, or nations.
Yes, and also there was white tribes in Africa as well that were Mudger tribes.
I think that's almost certainly true. Yeah.
Yes, and what they did was,
I mean, one of the things that's been wiped from African history recently is called the Hamitic hypothesis, and it's just because it's politically incorrect for them in the wake of the European colonial period to have historical white nations in Africa. But I mean, but at the end of the day, that's in itself is a political agenda. It's not objective.
Well, what they've actually done, what Bengali man has cleverly sort of worked out as well, is that they got these white tribes out of America and Africa. They did a combination of genocide, and the ones they didn't genocide, they repatriated them in Europe and gave them a whole heap of false ID to make them European, as if they were always from Europe and white in the first place, okay? And a lot of these
construct a false history in which white people came from Europe.
And the same thing with the whole African slave thing, where there were already a whole heap of black people in America as well, that they're basically trying to class under the African slaves that came from Africa, but they were actually already still in America.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean,
So
for instance, Tennessee is Tunisia, right?
Well, yeah, it's like even in America, they've got all their Egypts and Cairos and this, that, and the other. And so this is just another example of the pervachy constantly moving names of countries and places and people constantly all around in a long sort of process. This is Draco's strategy to basically, over time, you de-identify.
I don't think they've done that much of a good
where
job.
Their roots are anymore.
Well, I don't think they've done a very good job in terms of Africa, because there's still loads of names that you can link back to these major people. I mean, for example, Angola, Namibia. Ibia is Iberian or Hibernian.
Well, there's some huge stuff going on in Namibia because that's the only place that the Germans were interested in Africa to colonize.
Right.
And yeah, I thought I'd just mention that. But the thing is that a lot of these white tribes from South America and Africa were actually giants as well, like sort of Patagonian, sort of like giants.
Absolutely, yeah.
And
I mean, just here in Amboro, just down the road, there's I think I met a man who said he'd seen people 3 meters tall in the park, in the mountains and stuff, 3 meters high.
And also what they did was in Belgium, the Dutch, Holland, what they did was those people were always traditionally short people, and then literally out of nowhere they had all these sort of giant sort of people, white people, coming out of there as well, which, and this basically shows how they repatriated them as sort of Europeans to disidentify.
Right. Yeah.
And so they played the same trick. And it's the same with Australia. I'm sure that from at least Council of Nicaea, they had this planned out, okay, in the sense of, okay, we're going to take over Australia, but before we take over Australia, we have to kick all the whites out first to make it all black. So then further down the line, it's going to work for our Kalergi plan.
Yeah, sure. I think it's interesting in Africa as well that you had these Mediterranean Hamitic Egyptian kingdoms on the Nile, and if you trace the Nile to its source, you got Ugar again, because you've got Uganda. You see?
Yes.
And then you got the Tutsi people as well.
And just so people know, Ugar means uncultivated land or fallow land. It's literally just like natural sort of rainforest like sort of place. And there's 2 other Ugars in the world. There's one in the Ukraine and one in Slovenia. And if you have a look at the one in Slovenia, that's exactly what it is. It's just one big nature reserve.
Yeah. Well, I think the idea of them coming over from this Volga region was to go towards fallow land, to find a more fertile place to live, which is obviously what we call the Ukraine now. I mean, the whole word Ukraine is also Ugar.
Well, also, I'm finding all the roots of these northern sort of places, all the roots of these names come back here to Australia, because I've got it, like, say, for instance, with the old Gallia that used to be in France, that was Magyar, right? And the word Galatian, Gallia, comes back to here as well, okay? And more and more, I'm finding this all linguistically, it all comes back to here, because if you just follow the language, that's how literally you can follow the real history. And the Magyar language is incredible in this sense, because it literally is the language of source consciousness itself. It is source consciousness, okay? And when you're using this language, you're literally connecting with the frequencies and vibrations of all organic nature itself. And our bodies, in particular the Magyars, knew how to connect their bodies to all the primal elements of nature in order to do proper custodian work on Earth while it's our home, okay? Because you look at the human body, design denotes function. We are energy. This is what we're meant to be doing. The rest is a fucking distraction.
Sure.
Yeah.
let's go back to the manner experiences that we were talking about before.
Okay,
with these
this is
reptilians and stuff.
people to know as to why all of this manner experience stuff is all happening and what have you, because what they do is that they put intergenerational curses on all the original bloodlines, in particular the royal Magyar bloodlines, that people don't even know who they are anymore, family-wise, for the most part. But the Illuminatis do, because they have this information that they stole off all the original peoples worldwide. And they know when a certain person is coming through a certain bloodline, just like the Buddhists know when the next Dalai Lama or Lama is going to come through a certain bloodline.
It's almost like an inversion of Tibetan Buddhism. You know, it's like a dark version of the what they call the tulku system. No, the tulku is when they know that a particular being or person is going to be reborn in a particular place at a particular time.
Yes, and they have all of that technology, and I'd say from my analysis of all of this sort of stuff, it's about 80% accurate in the sense of they know when a certain significant sort of person from a past life is going to re-enter into the present, okay?
And then they plan to completely ruin that person's life.
Exactly, and humiliate them, which is part of the continual conquest of the original Magyar affinity, because let's face it, the Magyar affinity is the core of the original human knowledge. And once they got the Magyar Magi out of the way and colonized and got rid of them, it was much easier to basically capture all the other tribes, because the Magyars were the backbones of everything. They were the educators of all the knowledge.
Yeah, and I think that we all know this in plain English as well, because it doesn't matter which country you go to, it's always the same story in terms of the fact that the original people of whichever country it is, they all know that they originally lived according to something that was called magic, and then they were civilized. And of course, what we
they were very ethical. That was the whole thing about the Magyars, was that the Magyars basically lived with that inner fire, you know, with that limitless sort of, you know, passion and vitality for life. But at the same time, they were extremely ethical people, and they were all about doing no harm and living in literally sort of resonance with nature. I don't like using the word harmony because it's got the word harm in it, but that's the whole thing. And any technologies they made sure that it was safe technologies, and in particular, if it fell into the wrong hands, it couldn't be used, you know, in nefarious ways. But this is, unfortunately, things got well out of hand over the ages. And I reckon the whole pyramid sort of situation is a fine epitome of that, of when technology is built externally.
You mean like for instance, when Zoroaster or Zarathustra, who was actually the beginning of pervachy in Persia, which was the first Magi or Mede or Magyar nation to be taken over by pervachy.
Well, in the post sort of Atlantean sort of era, as the Atlantean,
exactly, after the 10,800 BC reset.
Yes.
Then Zoroaster is then credited with this Varna flying machine, in which he's depicted with the wings and so forth. But actually, he stole it from these Medes, from these Magyar. Or Magi is the Persian Magi before they became the Zoroastrian Persian Magi, which was of course a corruption of the original Persian. Persh just means fish, right? So that's another Magi symbol. But so what happened was something happened in terms of Zoroaster not being able to fully control this Kvarna machine. Which was, you know, presumably from a previous world age, in which it was used to travel in the galaxy and also to reach any point in the world within minutes. and he couldn't control it. And then, interestingly enough, this technology was then taken back by a magi whose name is Apam Napat. And Napat, or Nap, is obviously one of the words for
Sun.
magi words for the sun as the source. This
Yes.
goes back to what you were saying about how they used to live with this inner with their inner energy, and this inner energy is like the energy in the sun. You know, for instance, as it says in the Puranas, I think the spirit in the man and the spirit in the sun are the same spirit.
That's exactly right. And that's the whole thing about centering, is that you've got the sun energy coming through your solar plexus. And if you know how to center, you know how to connect your body organs with certain aspects of nature in order to get all information. See, the magi could literally get a straight source connection with their own center and not have to basically do any soul totem negotiation. That's another way of doing things too, or basically seeing things through your soul totems. But the magi actually had more deeper advanced techniques to literally even read the Akashic records. You know, you can do that straight from being centered with your appendix. I'm just giving away one of the deepest secrets there is.
Okay.
Because you look at
how do you see the progression, as you say, you're a criminal investigator, in relation to the criminal methodology of this pervachy, which is connected to non-human demonic beings like these reptoids or mantises or whoever they are?
Okay.
How do you see what do you see that criminal methodology as being in relation to this original Magi civilization? Well, you see the word, I'm getting the words wrong, because the civilization which we have been brought up to believe is the positive process of evolution is actually the parasitic pervachy process, because the Cybele is the cut lord's goddess, or you know, all this shit about they love to cut off their testicles and have sex with children and do human sacrifices and all the other perverted stuff that they love to do. So this word which Western society is so sort of enamored with, civilization, is actually a black magical concept of generation.
Right. I think Frank Zappa summed it up the best. You know, without deviation, there is no progress. Because this progress of them regarding this civilized nature is actually de-evolution when you really look at it. Because originally we were the mobile phones and nature was the internet. And look at this rubbish now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's very accurate. So tell me more about the criminal methodology. I mean, you said you're from your grandmother. Was it your grandfather was a policeman or something?
Yes. My grandfather, Dennis Cummins, who was born in Ireland, he actually started out, okay, I'll get into the methodology, but I carry the spirit of Dennis Cummins. To me, it's obvious. This is where I get a lot of my passion from. Cummins comes from it's a clan in the south of Ireland as well, okay? And he basically studied to become a Roman Catholic monk in a monastery in Ireland at first, right?
Okay.
And he basically went through that process, and then he realised that it was all corrupt and it was all wrong and there was no purity in it. So he basically left the monastery and went over to England to start a new life. And basically he became a policeman in the London police force, and he got to the rank of sergeant. And then there was some huge fire in London at some stage. I think it might have been the late 20s. I'm not sure, because it's been hard to get any information on Dennis Cummins, full stop. Just from apart from.
This is where the word Dennis, the phrase Dennis the Menace came from.
I'm pretty sure. Yes.
Okay.
And they're taking the piss out of him. Yeah.
Because he was a menace to pervachy.
Well, that's right. Because the thing was that during this particular incident that happened, he performed such brilliant strategy, and also how he performed under pressure. He actually saved a lot of people's lives in that whole situation from the directives and everything that he did during that situation. And he did such an amazing job that he literally got a promotion from sergeant to third superintendent in charge of the London police force.
I see. Okay.
Okay.
So he went right to the top.
He went right to the top, and he had a reputation as being incorruptible.
Right.
Okay. So this is where he ended up being a thorn in the pervachy side because of his, his 100% purity and ethics in being an honest policeman. But the thing is, he eventually got jaded from that as well because he could never go any higher than third in command.
I see. Okay.
So he watched all these other people being promoted for incompetency because they were, easily manipulable sort of people. Okay. Yeah. And then he eventually just got the shits and he went, this is all corrupt. There's no purity here as well. And so in a jaded way, he left the police force and he just got jobs in security companies and things like that for the rest of his life until he died. I think he died prematurely. And
I see.
In the sense of he died before I was born. He objected to the marriage of my father to my mother, most likely because she was Jewish.
Okay.
As well. I'm sure that her parents also objected to the marriage as well. And interesting enough, they both fucking died.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So, both of them. Okay.
So how old were they when they died?
Well, this is interesting. I think they died in the early 60s. Around the time they got married, I think that was 1962. And I don't know which one who died first, but it's all very mysterious, I haven't been able to get information out of my family about, hardly anything.
So when you were speaking before about how there had been at least 10 recorded cases of satanic ritual abuse by the London Metropolitan Police, and this was recorded by somebody called Wong, does that apply to a later period of time after the time of Dennis Cummins, or was that concurrent with him?
That's a very good question. I don't know, to be honest. And
okay, we need to look more at the Wong material.
Yeah, the Wilfred Wong material. I noticed that he's an ex-barrister in London that's been on the satanic ritual abuse trial for 27 years, and I think they've currently locked him up as well.
He might be a good lawyer for the Fuck Me I'm Jesus case.
Oh, he would be brilliant. He would be brilliant. He would be. I've checked out all of Wilfred Wong's work, and I find the guy to be really solid, actually, and he's done really great work towards exposing all of this. And I think the last time I heard about him a couple of months ago, he was in jail because he basically stepped in to basically stop a certain father abusing a certain daughter or something like that. And the father basically had his pervachy contacts, amongst the sort of police and social services and all that sort of thing, which is all corrupt, which is all full of pedophiles.
Oh yeah, I'm sure that the social services and the childcare in particular, I mean, obviously it's a place where they're going to source children for sexual abuse, ritual abuse, paedophilia.
Yeah, so he basically stepped in on a case, and they've worked out some way to say that he basically kidnapped the child, sort of thing, even though he was basically stepping in to protect the child.
So they framed him for doing the opposite of what he was trying to do.
He's going through a process where he's having to extricate himself from that, and obviously that's sort of held him up from doing his work in general, full stop.
Yeah.
So that seems to be...
Is he actually in prison?
The last time I heard he was, yes.
Okay. I mean, one thing I can tell you off the bat, about social services is when they tried to take my family down, and you
Yep.
you know more than anybody about what I've been through.
Yes.
It was like it was almost like a quick 1-2. You know, once they were trying to pull me down into the mental health system and say that I was insane and use all of these torture methods on me to try and break my mind, and they couldn't do it. I did break my body, as you know, like I broke my back in 2 places. I broke both my arms trying to escape. After the morning after they'd raped me with a rope around my neck, breaking my windpipe, massive rope burn on my neck, and they planted a nurse to use all kinds of distraction tactics, and they wiped my memory with this acetylcholinesterase inhibitor drug, so I couldn't remember everything properly. But one of the things that I noticed, Stephen, is that almost immediately afterwards they're trying to drive my mother, because this was in the wake of my father dying, you know, so they preying on the vulnerable, trying to take down people who are having a difficult time, and trying to get, and we're all Rh negatives as well, my family. So you know they're trying to get their hands on that Magi bloodline, and almost immediately they were also trying to get my mother framed as being incompetent, and they were trying to take my brother, who's nearly 4 years younger than me. They were trying to take my brother Nick into childcare. So you see, I think they were almost trying to take the whole family down.
When you're talking about what's part of their crime blueprint, which I'm going to get back to, once you finish sort of explaining all of this, because I think this is important to go into this testimony of yours. So I'll get back to the overall blueprint.
Yeah, please do.
Later after you do this, but I think it's important you sort of go into all of this because this is important. And just the fact that they hit you when you're at your weakest. They literally strategize to hit you hard.
That's what happened.
When you're literally at your most vulnerable. So this is how sadistic and unconscionable and unethical these people are.
And of course, cowardly. There's a cowardice to that.
It's beyond cowardly, you know, to actually hit. It's the old saying, they basically kick a dog when it's down.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, go on about that and explain how when your father died, they literally just went for the jugular on your whole family from what you've explained.
Oh yeah, I mean, like I was taken apart. I was taken aside in was it Bristol University after I had this experience of moving matter with my mind, and then I was reported, and so they want to do experiments on me. If you've got this ability like telekinesis or something. They want to run experiments. Yeah, I had MBEs like masturbating in front of me and making me like smoke cigars and touching my hands and just doing all kinds of really weird like homosexual foreplay. Like this is like MBE high level Freemasonry. Martin Crossley Evans. He was like inviting me on secret holidays to the Lake District and stuff like this, and he wanted me to go swimming with him, and he was and it was all about how we were going to wear special tailor-made swimsuits, you know, go swimming together, and he's like fully masturbating in front of me, but then they pull the rug under your feet quicker than you can respond, like get you all stitched up, say you're crazy, say you're mental. Then they give you drugs which actually do make you look like you're insane because they're Mengel's torture chemicals and things like this. And then they stitched you up so quickly that you can never put your memories together about exactly what they did, you know. But I mean, unfortunately for them, you know, I have a very good memory. I can remember exactly what I've been through, and I can put things together. And I mean, why would they think that somebody who was at Bristol University didn't have a good memory? You know, like I worked my beam end off to get into.
Well, it sounds to me that you had some, you know, extra sort of sensory sort of abilities that you're kicking into hard, and you'd worked out a lot of stuff on your own because you're a very naturally gifted and talented sort of person in general, because you just follow your nose. And basically, from what you just said then, that sounded like they attempted to groom you, basically, and so they could further use, experiment you, and then probably, you know, spit you out once they chewed you all up, you know?
Yeah, probably. I mean, the first thing that they did was they put me in a police cell. They stripped me naked in the middle of winter. This is December in Bristol, in England, right? Freezing cold. And then they were putting faked newspaper articles with these grey aliens on them, and they all had like brain electrodes stuck on them. And on the newsprint it said something like we found the extraterrestrial biological life, and now we're doing mind control experiments. So it was all, and you know, and they were putting this in like a cell that they'd locked me into, and then immediately after I'd been reading this material, then they jumped in and attacked me. I tried to fight them back, and actually, I assaulted a police officer. When they came into the cell, I punched him in the face, and then they further use anything like that to criminalize you. But I mean, I didn't know what was going on. I mean, like, I just had the scenes shifted on me like crazy, man. Like, just moving all of the, just suddenly, you know, the warden of my hall, you know, is coming and perving on me and masturbating in front of me and making me smoke cigars in front of him while he masturbates. And he's like a military naval historian, and he's an MBE. Do you know what an MBE is? An MBE is a member of the British Empire. So
That's right.
These are like super fucking top level people, man. And immediately, he's had all this crazy stuff going on, and obviously for me, I knew the whole thing was a stitch up. Obviously, I knew that none of this business was authentic, and none of it was honest. And so obviously, like, if a pair of policemen come into a tiny cell, like try to pin me to the floor, obviously, like, I'm gonna punch them, you know, because I didn't know what the hell was going on. So I was just trying to fight back, but then they use it to compound the charges against you and make sure that you're labeled as insane or whatever, and then they can give you the drugs to make you look like you're insane, and then they can do what they want with you, which apparently in my case was raping me up the arse while strangling me with like an inch thick rope. And I know because the morning after, the rope burn that I had around my neck was an inch thick, you know. So and my windpipe is broken off to one side, but then they planted a nurse.
Before you go further, James, so how did you end up from the police cell into the sort of the infirmary sort of institution where they basically did this to you, what you're describing right now?
I was moved around between a number of locations. So basically how I ended up in a police cell is this MBE Martin Crossley Evans pervert took me in his car after he'd finished masturbating and talk. You see, he finished his autoerotic preamble or meander or whatever you'd call it, and then suddenly everything changed. You see, you know, because he'd been leading me on and giving me these very expensive cigars to smoke, and I thought that he was, because I was very high. You know, after my father had died, I'd taken a drug overdose. It was just like cannabis or something, but like, so someone gave it to me, and it was one of those situations where I was like, I was just being very English, you know, and I didn't want to turn them down, so I just take this chocolate bar with cannabis in it or something. And then I had a lot of realizations, you know, about the nature of the cosmos and everything like that. And then he took me in and he sort of insinuated that we were like best buddies, you know. So it was almost like the whole thing was done for his like member of the British Empire jack off, you know, in terms of the way that he took me in and he pretended that we were like mystical friends and, you know, oh, we're so much better than everybody else.
Yeah, he was basically trying to establish like a handling, grooming sort of cord there.
And giving me this cigar, which is obviously like a symbol of wealth.
And basically giving you this sort of thing that when it comes to these sort of out there sort of mystical things, it's sort of like, it's something that
we're better than everybody else. That was
and you can always talk and connect with us on this level and no one else sort of thing, you know. It's
I see what you're saying. And also I thought that he was giving me a cigar because he realized that I was like in too much of a cosmic headspace, and so he was. I thought because he kept insinuating that he was so mystically, cosmically wise, when in fact he was just a pervert with an ego complex about how special he is, because he's probably, you know, like an overprivileged pretard. Public schoolboy, boarding school buggery, obsessed.
Well, there's always a saying, you know, don't let your pride get in the way of wisdom. You know, if you're full of pride, you've got no room for wisdom, and that's the problem with all of these types, because they're all ego, pride driven.
Absolutely, like he was very, very arrogant, distasteful, disgusting man. Like I've never seen such a disgusting creature, to be honest. I mean, he probably thought that he appeared to me as being, you know, the upper crust, you know, something superior. But I really saw him as almost like an animal. I mean, he actually looked in many ways like a pig. He was sort of sweating, and he was bald, and he was wearing, you know, the typical Masonic waistcoat with the watch chain and all of this other, you know, ridiculous, outdated Victorian attire. And man, he stunk, man. Like he smelled like well, obviously at the time I was 18 years old, you know. So when you're an 18-year-old, your semen has a very fresh and a sort of a very fresh scent. But this guy was just masturbating in front of me, and his semen smelled like sort of semen but mixed with rotten eggs, you know, like really just foul smell.
So it had sort of like a rotten sulfur sort of smell.
Yeah, like a sort of devil smell. And like when he was doing it, I just had this feeling that something really, really bad has just
Well, that's
happened.
a very interesting thing, because I remember this Aboriginal woman here on the street when she was basically referring me to go and see this mystical shaman in the Blue Mountains back in 2013. And she was telling me about that I would encounter sort of reptilians and things like that. And that in particular, they have a particular smell about them that exactly as you just described. Yes.
Oh, I see. That's very interesting.
Oh, yes. So
yeah. So when this guy had finished his autoerotic act in front of me while I was smoking this cigar, which I believed he had given me as a downer, but he had actually given me this cigar to presumably simulate oral sex on a man, which is something that I would never, being a relatively innocent 18-year-old, I would never really sort of suspected. But now I can see it really clearly. I mean, especially he put this, and of course this is connected to all of the symbolism and imagery that surrounds Jimmy Savile with the cigars. You know, that he's always got the cigar. So a cigar is obviously a big thing for them for multiple reasons. I mean, for one thing, it's privilege, it's money, it's how they're going to give you a leg up on Jacob's ladder. Maybe if you allow them to touch your dick or something like that, or if you allow them to rape you up the arse while strangling you with a 1-inch thick rope and break your windpipe, in my case.
Well, okay. Okay. Well,
That's what they were up to.
Now that you've gotten back to that, okay. So basically, they've moved you around in a few places, police cells and what have you, and you've ended up in this infirmary sort of situation where they're literally doing a hardcore sort of rape on you, where they've burnt your neck with some sort of like hanging rope or something like that.
Yeah, it's like they hung me or something. I mean, I don't even know what the ritual was like. I don't know who was there. I don't know if there were these non-human anthropoids involved. There may have been.
Yeah, because well, this is the thing. When they do the memory wiping, they also do it to make sure that you do not remember, especially when there's high-level stuff going on, especially when hybrids are involved like this, Draco hybrids. And now the thing is that there is a crossover point between the elites and the actual Dracos themselves, because a lot of the elites have a higher proportion of reptilian genetics in their makeup. And the more reptilian genetics that they have, it gives them some of them the ability to shapeshift themselves. So there's this middle ground between the elites and the Dracos, where some of the elites themselves, they're reptoids themselves like that. And the thing is that the elites that don't shapeshift are the ones that have less reptilian genetics in them. Okay, and the ones that do
like this President George Bush. You remember the first Bush, the Daddy Bush.
Yes.
I always just felt really strongly that he was this reptilian, you know.
Yeah, well, there's been other reports about him, like in Michael Prince's James Casbolt's sort of testimony about Papa Bush, so to speak, and he describes him as a saurian type of Draco, like as in his bloodlines. And it's interesting, I've actually done further research to find out that the Bush bloodlines are very much connected to the tall grey actual Draco bloodlines. So
well, it's interesting because this report that came out on the internet, and I think was it 2016, said that when they saw the Queen Elizabeth II of Great Britain transform into a reptilian, they said she was a dishwater grey color, and that also matches the Mexican photo that I put in this first document. You remember? It's a dishwater grey color, and that seems like it could be it could support what you say about these one particular class of these anthropoids being grey and tall.
Yeah. And also, so basically they've got you in this infirmary situation. They've done a sort of a memory wipe situation on you, yet you still, like myself, were able to remember certain fragments of the whole situation that you can further...
I can remember most of it. I think it was just... I obviously being myself and not knowing what it's like to be other people, perhaps I don't sort of... Perhaps I'm a little bit like you are in terms of being very, very resistant to both chemical and situational memory wiping.
Yes.
I've just got a very good. I mean, I bloody studied in one of the top Greater London grammar schools to go to this bloody university in the first place. You know, so obviously I've been honing my memory skills because I was a straight A student when I was at school. Well, at GCSE, which is the old O level I was. And then at A level, I think I got like A and 2 Bs. I should have got an A in biology. I got an A in Latin, which was very difficult. I got accepted to go to Oxford University. You know, the proper Oxford University to read Latin language, but I didn't take it because I thought it was boring to.
Yeah.
You know, obviously really study a dead language. You know, it's a little bit boring.
Yeah.
And I got a B in music, which was pretty good. considering I couldn't read music at the beginning of the course. I mean, like, I was a jazz musician like you, so I thought, well, I'll do A-level music to try and make myself a better musician. So I did the A-level in music, and I got a B in the end. I got 74%. Played Eine kleine Nachtmusik, Ron Carter style on double bass with two-finger tapping. I don't know if you've ever done two-handed tapping on double bass, man. It was new realms. I mean, that's why it was so tragic that when I had to escape from this Masonic reptilian butt rape situation, you know, I jumped out of a second-story window. I was like, you're not keeping me in here. But the first thing that I hit was my two wrists. I smashed my wrists, and they're still not better for 20 years, you know.
Yep.
Because I couldn't. I wasn't going to give up my freedom like that for something so illegitimate. I mean, they've essentially incarcerated me without trial, which is a human rights violation. They force-fed me drugs. I had six people sitting on my chest, force-feeding me just a cocktail, man. I mean, I remember 6 people. This was maybe immediately before the rape, and maybe some of the drugs that they were giving me were to put me into a special kind of reptilian state of mind, so that for the rape, or I don't know what the fuck ever. But I remember, you know, they had like whole handfuls of all kinds of pills of all kinds of colors and shapes, and I was just thinking, like, this is hell, you know. They're trying to destroy me completely. And so that's a human rights violation as well, because they force-fed me, and you're not allowed to force-feed people. And some of these drugs also that they forced me to take were they did destroy the ability of the pineal gland to produce melatonin. And obviously, I mean, I can tell you off the bat, as a biology student, you know, to inhibit the pineal gland producing melatonin means you can't go to sleep. And then they blame your lack of sleep on the fictional mental condition that they say you have.
Yes,
for abuse purposes. Yeah, so that's another human rights violation, because sleep deprivation is another human rights violation because it's officially torture.
Yes.
So I mean, there was one other human rights violation. I can't remember it now. And raping people while you're bloody strangling them. You know, just because you're a fucking MBE, or you're a bloody Freemason, or you're some kind of Illuminati pervert, half reptilian thing. I mean, it doesn't give you the right to assault someone. I mean, that kind of stuff is like beyond GBH. That's ABH. That's actual bodily harm. I mean, because all the 2 decades after that, the 20 years that came after that, I was always just wondering, like, what the hell happened to my windpipe? Like, why isn't it straight? It's like the windpipe is like broken off to one side inside my neck, to the left, right? And so if you imagine they've like tied me to a bed or something, and they're raping me up my bum with their disgusting Freemasonic penises, then and apparently, according to some of the literature, they believe that this is a way to take your energy, because you're a young man, you're 18 years old. Well, yes. they say like their favorite age is 8 years old, and that may have that may have a correspondence to, I don't know if you saw the film The Big Lebowski, but there's a whole thing about how one of the bowling club people is into fucking 8-year-olds, and he's called Jesus, right? And he's a Jew as well. So there's you see all the coding going through the entertainment.
And it's interesting. The number 8 is a big sort of thing with the Swiss and the whole octagon thing, and the octagon controls the pentagon. So the actual number 8.
They use the 8 on the side to mean infinity, don't they?
Yeah, and infinity really is just a folded fucking circle in a loop, and that's not fucking real affinity. That's a fucking program. It's actually
a programming concept. Yeah, it's a program.
It's actually taking the feminine primary archetype shape, which is the circle, and actually decrepitating it.
Yeah, sure.
It's a
Right.
manipulation on, for lack of a better term, the divine feminine, so to speak.
Well, I mean, I think their idea of the divine feminine is like a man who's got a cut off dick and balls and likes dress and is possessed by these anthropoid beings or works for them or something.
Well, it's pretty much like their sort of identity hijacking of Baal being a big fucking tranny fucking goat human or whatever the fuck it is. And the thing is that it's interesting because on Facebook at the moment, I've put a post up saying, does anyone know what the original Baal was before it got pervaked into, you know, this big sort of tranny sort of creature that it is now? Okay, now people talk about barium and aluminium and all that sort of stuff, and okay, there's certain sort of chemical sort of situations, but really, and not one person yet on Facebook has actually written the real meaning. And I'll say what the real meaning is here, because this is part of their blueprint, okay, their crime blueprint, is to take the feminine and transit into a masculine, okay? And this is a big part of Draco androgynous sort of low rent consciousness sort of mentality, okay?
Okay.
The whole perverse thing comes from the Draco mind for a start, because they're soulless, okay?
Yeah.
They have full use of all of their sort of abilities and stuff like that, but it's not centered. It's not soul centered. It completely runs on fear and paranoia, and hence the whole militaristic sort of mindset. And what they do.
Do you think they're more sort of neurochemical and DNA centered?
Yes, yeah, it's more to do with secondary inorganic sort of mediums, but both chemical, both shape, archetype, everything. Like all of the Draco technology works through crystalline structures.
Okay.
And crystalline structures, as we
crystals
know,
obviously being very important for all of these new age people, and if you dig
it's through crystalline structures that are secondary elemental structures that are inorganic, okay? And the thing is about the Magi, they mainly dealt with all of the primary elements that the Dracos can't handle, because it's too. See, they need to parasite off this source energy, but they need it in a step down sort of version, okay, in an inorganic sense. But as a Magi, when you're dealing with this scum and you're dealing with primary elements, primary shapes, and the source energy itself, they can't compete with that, full stop. Hence why they basically, eradicated this knowledge mainly through the Inquisition onwards. And because it was the Magi that they could not compete with. So once they got them out of the way, it was much easier to take over the rest of Earth.
Right, so now we're getting back into this concept of a crime blueprint that's unfolded over, shall we say, 7,000 years?
And I'm going to cite a few examples here of how they've got an original feminine thing and transed it into a male sort of thing, okay? Now, one example is with this Baal. Now, if you go up to any sort of tribal folk here in Australia that's still in the know with this stuff, which there aren't many, unfortunately, due to the whole colonisation process and stolen generations, if you go and ask them, where's Baal? They'll just literally point straight up to the sky, and that's it.
Yeah.
Now, what Baal is the feminine aspect of the sky and what we know as space, okay? It's all feminine. And that's what the original Baal is. And hardly anyone fucking knows it anymore. And you get all these people online quoting the pervert meaning of Baal, the identity hijack, but they don't know where it comes from in the first place. And this is how we reverse the spells.
Yeah, I'm seeing a parallel. I'm seeing a parallel between that and what happened in the Aegean, in terms of the original relationship of the material And the non-material, or as you say, space world, was originally that the material world or nature was considered male or yang because it's hard, and it limits you. And so they call it geb, which is the same as kaba. It's the limit or the cut or the stop, because that's what the physical world does or nature does.
Well, geb is where we basically get this sort of Hebrew term Gaia. That's fucking shit for the earth.
Yeah, so they reversed that as well into female.
Yeah, and they're saying they reversed the male into the female.
Yeah, they were because the physical world or nature.
Well, actually,
male or
well, no. They started hybriding nature in Atlantean times. Okay, they literally would mix any genetic combination together just to see what would fucking happen. This is the Draco fucking off the shelf sort of mentality when it comes to hybriding anything. Okay. And the thing is that what they did was they made nature harsh, if you get what I'm saying. Nature originally wasn't harsh. That's the whole thing.
No, but what I'm saying is that the differences between space or the sky and the physical world is that the physical world is physically hard, as in it physically stops you. Do you see? So that's why the physical world is, and it's the same in the Chinese, yang. And the non-material world, or akasha, or ether, or space, or tenja, tengri, indra, inti, heaven, was originally female because it's yielding, it's yin in this yin yang term. So in the Aegean, in Egypt, you had Geb for the earth. And then that was reversed by the pervert Greeks after the Homo Chaldeans or Pedo Chaldeans had come over from Babylon, the Babylonian Jews, through Crete and Rhodes, which is obviously where we get the Colossus of Rhodes, the first Statue of Liberty, with the Persian eternal flame, which is not the original Persian, but is the perverted Persian. Under Zoroaster, where they did this eternal flame thing, and I don't know why they're doing a flame. Maybe it's because they like turning things black. But yeah, also Crete, and so we got the Colossus of Rhodes, the Statue of Liberty, the Statue of Pervachy, if you prefer, and you've got the Minotaur, and the Minotaur is obviously the Chaldean Babylonian after Pervachy and the Babylonian Jews had taken over. Babylon, using their boy Cyrus, they just let him waltz into.
There's another example in the whole Sumerian thing. They talk about Ea, Enki being the fish god, but what they've done, the original Ea, as it says in the Avasura, okay, which is a lost journal of Magyar sort of history that academics like to say is a quasi sort of, pseudo sort of history, because these fucking academics don't have any spiritual fucking understanding of fucking anything, and they just expect everything.
Not usually. I mean, obviously.
They don't even know how to think like an ancient. They don't know how to center. So most of their legends and of the words and stuff like that they use to translate and things like that are all this sort of pedestrian sort of surface meaning that's got no spiritual depth to it. Yeah. And this is the problem. And unless you know how to center, you can't understand how the ancients basically approach things, because when you can center, you can read the stars, okay? And you will know the land by the stars. And that's how they all did it in ancient times. If you didn't know the sky, you didn't know the land. End of story.
Well, yeah, I mean, we all have the old concept that the Magi were primarily astronomers.
Yeah. And this is the thing. And it's like, I've spent time out in nature. It's, ancient tribal star maps, and I've watched the moonlight like a goanna from all angles, all around this star map during the whole course of a night on a full moon. And it's absolutely ingenious how they got to read the stars and understand the actual light and shadows as it hit the star map down here, and they would spend days, weeks, months studying all of this stuff and getting into a really deep space with it. And they could literally go surfing through the Milky Way from being centered and basically having this connection with the sky and the land. And if you didn't have that, you weren't plugged into nature. You didn't know what the fuck was going on.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
You know, and look how far we have literally devolved since. It's just ridiculous. Here we are analysing mainly all of this third-party fucking information given to us so we can find some sort of dot connecting thread through it all. But then when you learn how to centre properly, you can go and find out all of this information firsthand, either having a direct connection to source or basically remote viewing through soul totems. There's so many different ways of doing it through centering, it's not funny. And the thing is with centering is that you'll often find accurately the information first before you even know all the fucking details. That's what your instinct and intuition is.
So what went wrong? What went wrong across the world in terms of this criminal blueprints? And the more we look at it, I think it is definable.
Well,
it is limited.
I've just pointed that out. It seems like the name of the Sumerian fish god that's more accurate would be Oannes, but I still have to check that out even more thoroughly. It may be that. Jordan Maxwell seems to indicate that, but he never talks about the Magyar thing, and he had to basically become a Freemason to protect himself as well at the end of the day. So that's
I remember Jordan Maxwell
saying that.
Yeah, I remember his material.
But
the interesting thing about Aya, the interesting thing about Aya is, of course, that the planet that we're on is named after Aya. So it's obviously something very important, and I don't really know what it is. I know that you've been talking about Aya.
Well, it's the inner
part. But I mean, Aya is what this planet is called after Earth. It means it's Aya's world.
And it's actually feminine and not masculine.
Okay.
See, because most of nature is actually feminine, and the masculine sort of part of nature is the support structure. It's like the murex fine binding that holds it all into place, you know?
Right, yeah.
And
well, I mean, one of the things that I think is important to state at this juncture is that everybody is going to Zecharia Sitchin for the Sumerian stuff, and they're not doing. None of us have. I've known about this Sumerian stuff since 2001, and that's actually what led me to discover this thing about the Magyar in Ecuador in 2008, because Moric, or was it Jan Sandor? I think he went by two different names. Who was a Hungarian who lived in Ecuador, and went through all of these different tribes and said they're all speaking Magyar, but he saw Sumerian and the Magyar language as one, and that's something that you'll never see.
That's correct. It's correct.
Yeah, and you'll never see that in Zecharia Sitchin, because in Zecharia Sitchin is it looks like gatekeeping. That's what I want to say, and I think it was this Arizona Wilder person who was reporting about the shape-shifting reptilians like the Queen Mother or whatever. She actually specifically said the Zecharia Sitchin was one of these shape-shifting
that's right.
reptilians. So we're going to them. We're going to them for knowledge about our own history with the Sumerians, which is insanity.
And that New Zealand sort of researcher, John Gray, he totally outed Sitchin years ago, because when he eventually got a Sumerian sort of dictionary of the real words and stuff like that, he went and translated
nothing like himself.
It. Yeah. And he's going, hold it, Sitchin's just making stuff up here. He's not even translating fucking text. And he even approached Sitchin about it.
I mean, it's probably even worse than that, isn't it? I mean, if you really think about it, he's probably not making stuff up. They've probably got like a bloody MK Ultra Nazi mind control manual, and they're doing programming with it. So it's even worse than making stuff up.
Well, Zionism and Nazism are two sides of the same fucking elite coin.
Exactly.
Yeah, and they basically play them against the middle to basically get the agenda that they need.
And there was a big Vatican Jesuit element in Nazism as well.
Okay, so basically, see, when you look at the whole Sumerian equation, bottom line, unfortunately, Judaism has been the antagonist of the whole Magyar affinity right from the word go, from that sort of period where the Hebrews just appeared out of fucking nowhere, basically.
But didn't you say that the Judaic stuff was all ripped off from the Magi anyway?
Exactly. That's what I'm getting to. Everything Jewish is originally Magyar. End of fucking story. Okay. And the same with Christianity, the same with Buddhism. Okay. There's elements of the Muslim stuff and Hindu stuff that have Magyar in it, but that's really got more to do with a lot of the history of other tribes as well. But when you look at the language that all of these sort of 5 main religions and spiritualities all had their roots in, it all comes back to Magyar language, the whole fucking lot. Yeah. They're all chapters of the same book that's been divided up, you know, as a divide and conquer thing to get them all, you know, to fight against each other, where it all comes from the same book. And you can read this book literally in yourself through centering, through the original Australian dream time, where there's, see, the problem with the fucking Bible, it's a very carefully selected bunch of books after basically the Habaru basically stole all of these scrolls that's known as the Targum scrolls, okay? And basically speaking, when you look at the Bible, there's all this chronological sort of stuff that just jumps around all over the place with huge sort of gaps in the chronology and history and stuff like that. And with the Australian Dreamtime, the original stuff, it's got the whole lot there.
Yeah.
You know, the Australian Dreamtime describes life right down to the finest grain of sand and the finest tremor. And you can only do that with the Magyar language, because that's a language that bewitches source consciousness itself. Because the one thing that does
360
is in the beginning was the word. Now, what's the word? It's actually the language. It's the communication, whether it's on an instinctual, intuitive, psychic, telepathic, sung or spoken level. It's all the same language of communication. That source consciousness is source, you know, that's the energy of source itself, you know, and that energy.
We know that they went.
Is the language.
They went all over the world, telling people that they mustn't use the magic spells. So if it's the magic spells, they're actually talking about language. They're talking about not using the original language.
Well, that's right, because this original language, okay, it comes from nature itself, because this language.
Do you see that as being the language of this Tower of Babel? Do you see that as the Tower of Babel thing?
Well, that Tower of Babel was in Australia. End of story.
Right.
Early Genesis,
yeah, because if it was in Sumeria.
Yeah, early Genesis was all in Australia. Okay. End of story. And it's like the first Tower of Babel was here, out at the Mountain of Three Hills. If people go and remote view this stuff, they'll see it all for themselves. Okay. The Mountain of the Three Hills being Uluru Katachuta, and what used to be called Attila Mountain that they changed to Connor Mountain. And who named Attila Mountain? It certainly wasn't the British perbucks.
Yeah, even though the English actually means Hungarian.
Yeah.
Angles. Angle is the word ong or hong, plural, because in Turkic language, la is plural, so that's why there's an L in the word angles.
Well, Anglo-Saxon is son of Isaac in the Bible, and that's literally what it means. But the thing is that, yeah, the Bible is literally, there's truth in there, but essentially it is a crock of shit in the way that it's all put together, and it's not accurate, and it's all Hebrewized as well. It's like the fact that the second son of Noah after the flood was actually Arpad, but they've changed it to Japheth, haven't they? Now, why have they done that? And all of these other sort of Hebrew sort of names. So they're not even translating the Aramaic correctly, as far as I'm concerned. You know, it's another Sitchin job, the Bible. Seriously.
Well, the funny thing is that I don't think the Israelites spoke Hebrew. They spoke Greek.
Well, not only that, at the time of Babylon, the Hebrews were actually speaking Assyrian.
Okay.
Now, I've got that from a Masonic source too, from a Jewish guy that translated Aramaic straight into English. And he provided a lot of facts and details that are very hard to find because the Hebrew scholars keep shit all to themselves generally.
Okay, we've got about 35 minutes left before we hit 2 hours time.
Okay.
Do you want to go back to this concept of a criminal blueprint for the draconian pervachy?
Okay.
And your personal experiences in Port Macquarie after the rituals, the first rituals which you had experienced involving this statue and involving this strange Rothschild-looking
I'll get
professor.
to that, but just give me 5 minutes just to summarise this whole turning the female into the male sort of thing. They did that with Lucifer as well. Okay, you just have to look at basic astrology. You know, Lucifer was a feminine aspect, you know, aligning with Venus, okay? And it also connects back to the original Baal as well, okay? And yet again, they turn a feminine thing into a male thing, and look at what Lucifer is now. It's literally the god of Freemasonry, that, you know, and they make Enki that Lucifer as well. So can you see how all of this identity hijacking?
Yeah, that's true. I've seen that as well.
Look,
yeah, they make Enki to Lucifer.
It's a big faggot thespian show. They turn it into a big theatre, fucking Hollywood theatre production, and they literally get off on being fake and getting away with it. They literally get off on the thrill of it, okay?
Yeah.
And so straight away you have Ea, that was a female Magyar priestess of fires that they've turned into a Sumerian male fish god, and then they further basically attach the whole Lucifer sort of thing to it as well, you know, to really cement it being male, okay? So this is a common thing all throughout all of the history of taking the feminine and making it male.
Can I ask you a question while we're on planets and stuff?
Okay, and
obviously
also,
you know that I've covered things about
James,
the moon.
With the overall crime blueprint, there is, okay, how you basically decode everything is that original reality is a multipolar reality. It's a limitless multipolar reality that moves in waves and motions that are not in a programmed pattern, okay? Hence, it doesn't move as far as conventional programmed time, okay? So what they do is they get the original whole multipolar sort of Magyar knowing, and then they split it into bipolar duality, and then they reverse polarize that duality. That is their bottom line blueprint, point blank, full stop, period.
Okay.
Or simple way
how do you
putting it is reverse child psychology.
Okay.
That's how you decode it all back onto them. And I've had plenty of practice with the voice to skull in doing that. It's sharpened up my skill big time.
So how does the moon fit into this? Because the moon is obviously a bit like a fake sun. And
the moon is a real conundrum. It really is, because people like David Icke are definitely in the right direction on this whole Saturn moon sort of matrix, because the moon seems to be a bitch of Saturn in the way that it operates. And it seems to be connected, and the moon wasn't always up there as well. If you go far back enough in history, you'll find that the Dracos actually dragged the moon in from another galaxy, because that material is not from here. And they basically...
Well, I don't think they would need to have brought it from another galaxy, but I mean, I certainly think that it was placed, and all of the evidence suggests that it was placed.
If you look at the composite sort of makeup of the moon, it's not from here. Okay.
No, I mean it's an iron core. It's an iron core, and by magnetic action, it pulls the orgone or electrostatic charge out of our planet every time it is the full moon. And when it's the full moon, the moon is obviously on the opposite side of the Earth from the sun.
See,
And
and the pervachy call the moon feminine and they call the sun masculine, and that's totally fucking wrong.
yeah, I mean, it all seems like more of this reverse polarization thing.
And this has been going on since distorted Egyptian times as well. And I'm still in the process of working out how the mother energy meets the father energy to produce the child energy.
Well, I'll tell you how the energy works is because, I mean, in terms of this concept of confused tongues, confused languages, I mean, we have the confused term magnetosphere, whereas in fact, it's equally an electrosphere, and it's not spherical. So the way that it works is it's actually shaped like a comet, and it has a plasma tail, an ionic electric tail on the dark side of the Earth, which is always centered at midnight wherever you are, because that midnight is the middle of the dark side of the Earth, and so it's being blown out in the direction of Mars or in the direction of the outer solar system by the solar wind. And what happens is that the moon, during its orbit, intersects with this tail. And when it intersects with this tail, what happens is that the magnetic action of the iron, which constitutes the moon, pulls the electric energy into itself. So it's literally like a vampiric action on our life force. So I think
this is the thing. If you just put it in short, you look at all the 5 main religions: Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, and Hinduism. They're all sound coded to Kabbalah and Saturn. So literally, Saturn is literally being the big vampire right behind the moon, full stop, in taking all of human soul energy.
Yeah, it's something like that. It's something like that because the electrosphere of this planet is interrelated with all of the organisms and the oceans, obviously, as well. But yeah, the energies of the organisms are being completely messed up with. I sometimes wonder that this is why both the mammals and the human beings have lost size, because the moon, apparently, I mean, according to tribes like the Muiscas of Bogota and this place Tunja, I was telling you about in Colombia, which was originally called Hungar, I had an amazing experience there. When I went to this place Tunja or Hungar, and I had an experience. I felt like I'd stepped outside of time, and I couldn't explain why I felt I stepped outside of ordinary time. But it could have been part of the magic of this Magi place in Colombia. But anyway, what I found, and Muisca obviously sounds a little bit like magic. Anyway, what I found, they had a teacher who was one of these American teachers like Viracocha and Quetzalcoatl, but it was a different one, and he was called Bochicha, because there were these various different like high magi, and they were all white people who taught in South America immediately after the flood.
See, this is the thing. What the Dracos have done is they've totally inverted the original white man, which is the Magyar, okay, who was noble, ethical sort of fraternity of, it was a big family of tribes, various tribes. And basically this white man wasn't the fuckwit white man that they've portrayed the white man to be, in the sense of the colonised British basically going and colonising and controlling the world, okay?
Yeah.
And let alone all the other sort of white sort of chain jerk sort of European nations like the French and the Spanish and the Dutch and all the rest of it, that were all colonial invaders. And so what they've done is getting the whole world to hate the white man, but no one remembers anymore that everything came, from this original Magyar white man who wasn't a fuckwit at all.
Yeah, I reckon it's another confused tongue thing actually. Like
yeah,
the word white is this word Uyghur or wheel people. So that or Uyghur or yoga. So inherently, the concept is supposed to be about having this solar energy circulation inside yourself, which is perverted in the macrocosm by the moon by the mechanism that I've just explained. And obviously, what I was going to say about the Muiscas, who were the disciples of Bochicha, and the Sikhs and the original Greeks and other nations across the world, they recalled that there was no moon before the flood. Yeah. And they also recalled that the moon was an evil planet. And they said this moon is evil, it shouldn't be here, and it's causing this fall of man. It's causing this fall of mankind, and it's, according to my analysis, it's this magnetic action during the full moon.
It's a fucking Death Star, basically, if we just want to put it in simple Star Wars terms.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it is literally vampiric death energy leeching the life force out of this planet every single full moon. And I think it was put there to make us all go insane perhaps by these anthropoid reptoids.
I can tell you straight away that these Dracos literally have planetary technologies, okay, that they've been using. Look, they've gone and colonized so many worlds in the galaxy and further solar system.
Well, I'm definitely seeing a modus operandi in common at this 10,800 BC reset, or 12,800 years ago.
Well, did you get that email where basically someone sent some information from one of our contacts that basically confirmed the 10,800 BC thing, and they were basically saying that the Dracos basically used asteroids and things like that as weapons back in those times to literally fuck up Atlantis. And they said that
it's pretty obvious because the
not only that iron comet that went into Greenland, they confirmed that bit of information. I'll dig it out of the email if you haven't seen it already. And they said that there was another one as well. There wasn't just the one sort of iron comet, there was another one. And they basically used this to basically destroy the whole sort of Atlantic situation. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's interesting between the two comets. I mean, I had more focused on the Greenland comet because I saw the correspondence between the location of the impact of the Greenland comet and the location of Mount Meru, the Vedic Mount Meru, by Valery Uvarov, using the alignments from Mount Kailash and the pyramids of Xi'an in what they call China. It seems to be a very, very abused concept, and Teotihuacan in Mexico, and they all line up. And those pyramids actually are all the same dimensions. They're the same shape in Xi'an and Mexico.
Yeah.
And they all line up to this place in which Valery Uvarov said was Mount Meru in Greenland, which is something that I read about more than a decade ago, I think, and I always kept it in my mind. So that when I saw this new paper on the Hiawatha comet, and obviously that they had to admit in this paper that it was a rare iron meteorite, so they had to admit that it was rare, and obviously if they're mainstream academics.
I just remember where the other meteorite was in that Eye of Sahara sort of place as well.
I don't know about that, man, because that's actually a giant mud volcano. But yeah, coming back to Mount Meru.
Yeah, I'll basically brief you on this information that I received. It literally links with your information that you've worked out and basically explains a little bit more. And another Hungarian researcher has been basically pointing at the Eye of the Sahara thing at me for the last couple of weeks. And now all of a sudden, this whole sort of asteroid Draco manipulation thing has landed in my lap again about this very thing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, it's the most significant date of our era.
Yeah.
Is this 12,800? But yeah, they had to admit it was a relatively rare iron comet. So I'm seeing a common modus operandi between the comet that hit near Valery Uvarov's Mount Meru and also the plain of Atlantis. The reason that nobody can find the plain of Atlantis is because it got put under ice in Greenland.
Well, the thing is, James, that when we're looking at Atlantis, we're looking at a whole worldwide sort of situation.
Yeah, I know, but I'm talking about the plain of Atlantis in the middle of the world ocean, which joined 3 continents. It joined to Siberia through Svalbard, because Svalbard...
Okay, so you're talking about Hyperborea being the central sort of Atlantean sort of plain.
I'm talking about the plain of Atlantis, not the empire. You're talking about the empire of Atlantis. I'm talking about the plain of Atlantis, the central country where Mount Meru was, the legendary Mount Meru that the Hindus place in the Himalayas, because they remember that it was to the north of India, but actually it was much further north than India, because Siberia went.
Well, this is all part of this Draco sort of process of de-identifying us by constantly doing all these resets and moving people around, so no one really remembers where they come from.
Yeah, that could be a reset thing as well, in terms of moving Mount Meru to the Himalayas, just because they remembered.
Well, look, it's like the same. They moved the original Babel after Australia up to the Shetland Islands, right? To basically do another thespian faggot fucking theatre rerun up there. If you get what I'm saying, this is part of the criminal blueprint.
Yeah, for sure. Anyway, yeah, the modus, just to finish it off quickly, the modus operandi that I saw in common was that they did an iron meteorite at Mount Meru in the plain of Atlantis, in the middle of the world ocean, where it joined Siberia and Britain and Canada all into like a big land bridge. Well, it would have been 3 or 4 land bridges, and ironically, the one land bridge that they do allow in academia, which is Beringia, wasn't a usable land bridge because it was covered with an ice cap. Because you remember I told you that the ice cap was centered over the Yukon. Information I received in a vision when I was 19 years old. And so there's a common modus operandi between an iron comet to remagnetize the planet and the placing of an iron moon at the same side of the sky. Now, I actually sat at the corner of my road when I was 9 years old, looking at the moon and the sun, and trying to work out whether it could be natural that the moon and the sun would be the same size as viewed from Earth. And actually, my conclusion at 9 years old was that it was an artificial situation, and I couldn't explain it, but it was there. I mean, if it was
isn't it amazing how just that raw sort of knowing, as an innocence of a child, that you just know these things just with your gut, so to speak, before you even know the details of why.
Yeah.
It's literally.
So I mean, this information is important because if we're really serious about taking this whole Kabbalism, pervachy, Draco, non-human anthropoids, whatever it is, thing down, then I think the moon is a big part of it.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and I agree with you there. And I'd just like to say for people, the original meaning of Kaaba in Magyar, okay, which is the real original meaning, literally means under illusion or drugged. Okay, so when you're looking at Kabbalah, that's what you're dealing with.
So would you say there's a sense of bewitchment there as well?
Oh, totally. It's all illusory. It's all mirrors. It's all labyrinths of fucking divided dimensional sort of mirrors that when you use your fisheye at your crown, you don't even need your pineal to basically go surfing in the Milky Way and other places. Okay.
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 So going back to the criminal blueprint.
The third eye and the pineal is part of the alien, as far as I'm concerned, because you only get the third eye is so programmed and controlled, and through the experiences of the V2K they've done on me and all these fake AI astral programs have tried to get to sucker me into and all the rest of it through my third eye and all sorts of stuff. Man, I could literally write a book on just that alone. But the thing is about the third eye astral, it's very limited in what you can actually remote view through and do through. And you don't actually need your pineal. And I remember my friend Dragon, who basically, he was the DARPA Project Pegasus and Montauk friend that I had for many years, who's gone off grid many years ago because he knew what was coming years ago. He basically said to me, he got, when he was working in doing stuff through Montauk and stuff like that, he literally told them to take his pineal gland out. He told them, get rid of this fucking thing. I don't want it. You know, it's just getting in my way. And he could still see into all levels of the astral and beyond without the pineal. Okay. And it took me 10 years to find out about the centering through the fisheye properly, which is at your crown. And you also have a Stargate there. And it basically shows you this on certain sort of pictures I've actually put up on Facebook now through Tribe of Dan, Sumerian stuff and original tribal stuff from Australia that show the same centering stuff in how to activate this fisheye. And when you look at the headgear of the Pope, that's what it's basically hiding in plain fucking sight.
Yeah.
The Pope is telling you, I'm the only one who can have the fisheye on the crown here. I'm the only one that's fucking God here. So
and they are the Sadducees. So they're the Satanists from 10 tribe Israel. After the 10 tribe Israel broke up with the tribe of Judah, which had previously ruled the 12 tribes of Israel, which the current Israelis are pretending to be. And I think the real ones are the Ethiopians.
Well, this is the thing. It's like you could have the Ethiopians, you could have the Welsh, you could have all of these.
Mediterranean people. Yeah, Mediterranean people. Yeah.
They've used people from both light skin and dark skin sort of Draco human hybrid races to basically hijack the Magyar affinity right throughout the whole world. And if you look at the whole of Jewish history, they don't even know their fucking real history as well because they hide it from them, because essentially the Khazars and Hebrews and all of that, they come from fucking Tiamat. Okay, now that's contentious in me saying it, but I'm just going to put it out there. I've done a lot of study to work these things out on many, many levels. And it even ties in with the Lord of the Rings Middle Earth being in America from around 10,000 BC and the Khazars actually arriving there around that time and places them there.
Okay.
And anyway, that's a big story about a moon of Tiamat known as Lilith or Malona.
So do you see this criminal blueprint of the pervachy as essentially sending everybody round in a sort of illusion, a Kabbalah?
Oh yeah, it's just one continual negative feedback loop, you know, to put it, you know, simply.
What sort of hope do you think that there is to restore this original magical society on this planet, considering how far
it's very simple to basically call out their power. You have to literally call them out for truly what they are. Okay, that's how you take away their power. And how we do that is that we give back all the original meanings that they've stolen off us and they've used for their occult hierarchy. Okay, occult.
So you see language as centrally important.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like look at that with Kaaba. Look how much that releases when people realise that no, it's not the fucking name of a cube and that thing in fucking Mecca and all that sort of stuff that's sucking up all your soul energy. Okay. Kaba, it literally means under illusion. It means drugged. It's like this is the wrong. It's the wrong stuff. It's not the original real reality. It's an inorganic.
Doesn't it also
sort of
mean they've cubed or cut the head? Because obviously, when you're drugged or drug, it's like you've got your head cut off, or your head has been cut by drugs or alcohol. And obviously, there's a whole other band of symbolism to do with cutting off the head from the body, isn't there? Like the Cairo, and the skull and crossbones.
How they're constantly going from the 9 back to the 11 or the 2 again, and missing out the 10, and they cut the head off of humanity symbolically on the 10, okay, from its body center, okay. And the great sort of example of that is the John the Baptist's birthday, right in the middle of their pagan calendar.
Yeah, precisely.
You know.
So like, Steve, are you actually officially like a Jew if your mother's a Jew?
Well, according to their fucking bollocks, yes, but but when I look at it and I trace back the real bloodlines, of which I've got all the original Magyar bloodlines and all the pervachy bloodlines as well, it allows me to see into both, and how basically everything Jewish is originally Magyar. End of story.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't care who gets offended by this, because once they know the real history, and those that really want to know their roots and following their nose and not letting their ego and pride get in the way, okay, will appreciate this information. Because when you look at your standard run-of-the-mill Jews, they're just being used as a matador's cape against the people by the Satanists, okay?
Yeah,
they're being used.
Sure.
They're being totally
because the top Jews are all part of this Babylonian Satanism thing. The same as the top Caucasians and the top Africans and the top
all of them.
Yeah,
that's right. They've worked out a program for all the races. Like with all the black people, they put them all through the Bull Society.
Right. Yeah, and the Prince is all.
You know, and it's just like they've got it all covered. And what they've done for the whole Magyar affinity, they've used both dark-skinned and light-skinned Jews through all ages, whether they're original Jews or not. I don't give a fuck, because they've used all of them to basically literally antagonise the whole Magyar situation by constantly hijacking them all. And
because they're claiming to be the God's chosen people.
Well, they're Draco's chosen people at the end of the day.
Well, I mean, but I mean, if you go back to Noah, Arpad or Yarpet is the son of Noah, and so is Ham. So by those conditions, most of the people in the world are God's chosen people, or the descendants of Noah.
See, Noah is a Hebrew name as well. If you look at the Magyar name, what's that? Napushap. I can't even remember what it is off the top of my head, but it actually tells you what he really is, and it's connected with the sun. And I'll just say this for people out there: the Magyars were not sun worshippers, for fuck's sake. That was what the pervachy did to it, turned it into a sun worshipping religion. The Magyars did not worship anything. Why would you worship an idol or the sun or anything like that when it's part of you just as much as nature? You're a part of nature as much as nature is a part of you. So,
well, I mean, my take on that is that the sun that's a way to make them look primitive, when in fact they were the ones who were advanced, and it was the civilization by the parasitic pervachy, which became primitive. That was what created primitiveness on this planet.
There's no such thing as the whole fucking caveman thing. That's just a fucking lie, okay? They're just making us to be fucking caveman and all that fucking shit.
But I mean, obviously there is a relationship with the solar concept, and like I said before, the wheel concept, or Uyghur concept.
It was really simple with the Magyar. They simply had gratitude and respect for the source of all life, which is the sun. If we don't have the sun, there's no light. It's that simple.
Yeah.
It's that simple. It's not sun worship. You don't fucking worship anything. As soon as you worship something, you're creating an energetic portal to fucking.
But isn't there a deeper layer of this entire situation in terms of the fact that we actually have a solar energy circulation inside of ourselves, which is why we use the word in English.
Our solar plexus, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's why we have the word in English, the soul.
Yeah. Well, why do you think it's called the solar plexus? It's like they're actually, they're actually giving the game away there for someone who's very observant,
Of course. Yeah, I mean, in other languages, it has other names.
Yeah. So I haven't got much back into the Port Macquarie stuff, but I think it's very important for us to explain the original Magyar affinity here that hardly anyone knows about.
Nobody knows about it. I mean, I always knew since I was a little boy that I was one of these Magi people, and I always wanted to know more about them, because obviously, if they came to Jesus Christ when he was a baby, he was obviously one of their lot, So, and if these people knew how to follow a star to find some lost baby in the middle of nowhere, in a farm or something, then obviously they were on the ball, they knew what they were up to.
Well, that Magi, those three Magi that basically followed this star, well, that star wasn't necessarily just a star. That was a living being that they were communicating with, okay?
Oh, yeah, that's also possible. And actually, one of my friends when I was growing up, his father was Latvian, and he was actually called Casper. And so he was named after one of the Magi who came to give the adoration of the Magi to the baby Christ.
Well, so, basically they gave gifts of myrrh, frankincense, and I think it was gold or something, some form of gold. And that was basically, they talk about, the phoenix. That's a Greek sort of term for the original Turul eagle of the Magyars, okay? And the Turul eagle is the bird of the sun, okay? And basically speaking, those three wise Magi basically brought those gifts for basically Jesus, I should say Izu, that's his real Magyar name, okay, to basically, what you do with those sorts of gifts, that is how the phoenix reborns itself. It's not this bullshit sort of phoenix rising through the ashes, okay? That's a distortion of the Magyar word umber, okay, which in ember, in English, is perverted into meaning the embers of a fire, the burnt up pieces of wood, that make the actual ashes for the phoenix to come through. Well, that's the distorted sort of meaning. How a phoenix, or Turul rather, actually rebirths itself is that when the bird knows it's going to die, it basically makes a nest out of myrrh and frankincense, and the actual egg itself has some sort of gold lacing on it. And the phoenix actually smothers the actual egg and dies, and the actual new baby is born again just from the heat of the actual mother, that actually sacrifices its own life to basically make sure it gets its rebirth. Now, no one knows this stuff.
No, nobody knows it. Well, I mean, obviously, I'm
telling you,
Phoenix sounds like.
But there's more to this. But it's like, and they do not explain any of this in the fucking Bible or anything like that at all. It's just all this Hebrew sort of rubbish.
Yeah, it's pretty much nonsense, and it's also self-contradictory, isn't it? If you look at different parts of the Bible, you get completely contradictory messages from different books. So it's not like a word of any one God, because if it was the word of any one God, it would be consistent.
This is the thing. The bottom line about the Magi is that they knew the secrets of creation, of real organic creation, and how to connect your bodies with these primary elemental forces of nature in order to be proper earth custodians and omniversal custodians as well.
Well, I'll tell you what, Stephen, you've certainly made a point which connects the Phoenicians to the Magi, because if the phoenix really is a turul, which is to mean a kite or a hawk, which is the Magi symbol, then obviously a Phoenician is a Phoenician. So that a Phoenician would then be a person of the turul.
That's exactly correct. Exactly correct.
Yeah.
And really,
man, we've hit 2 hours again.
Okay, and when you look at turul and look at turul and the word Turanian, now it's not too different, is it?
No, it's obviously connected, because the Magi were all the way over there on the east of the Caspian Sea, and then they moved over to the Volga, as we've discussed, and then to Scythia, to Ukraine. Scythia was the original name for the Ukraine.
Well, we've basically got 2 points of survivor migration from that 10,800 BC sort of incident of the actual asteroids or comets basically hitting Meru and other places. The Eye of the Sahara, it seems to be the other place at the moment. I'll have to confirm that further, but it's looking likely at this stage. But the thing is that there were mudges. Okay, so basically Greenland, Hyperborea, they had to basically flee out of there, and there was a migration path through there. And there was also a survivor migration path when Atisis sunk, which is in the area now of Federation of Micronesia, which was the last significant sizable part of Mu to go down. And when that sunk, you basically had mudges that basically went through the Americas, like the Incas and stuff, and the Toltecs. And then you had mudges that went through Asia, that went all the way up to Africa, hence the whole Hun situation in China before the Chinese. The mudges reaching Africa and all throughout Asia as well. Okay, so there's 2 different survivor paths. And then you have the mudges that were basically here in Ugar, Australia as well.
So this is basically following Churchwood.
Yeah, well, it's Churchwood stuff, but also information from the Abasura, and also your information regarding Greenland and the main sort of plain of Atlantis, as you
I'll tell you one thing that you said on a previous conversation, which seems to line up with something in South America, is that you said the white Magyar left Australia, was it 1,300 years ago, and that seems to line up with the timing of the Chachapoya or Chaka kingdoms in Peru.
Yes, I did work out that there was a contingent from Australia that did end up in South America from around that time. And Attila Flink's work, he basically said the Mudgers that left here 1,300 years ago, when a Redfern man told him this when he was living in Woolloomooloo at the time, where I live, that Attila then traced that route where they left here. They basically went up through the world to Persia, and then they went onto the Carpathian sort of basin into Europe. And it seems like they basically worked out a plan that allowed the pervachy to eventually landlock all the Magyars in the Northern Hemisphere once they'd all basically been sort of flushed out of the Southern Hemisphere, if you're getting what I'm saying.
Yeah, okay, I see what you mean.
And hence they've separated the Magyars from their true roots in sort of a Atisis Mu in Australia.
Yeah. What time are you now in Australia, in Sydney?
3:34 in the afternoon.
Okay. What sort of time do you stay up until in the evening?
I'm staying up quite late at the moment. I
might catch you morning your time, to go over the manor and the Port Macquarie stuff, which you experienced in terms of rituals and reptoids.
Well, today's good because we basically got out some of your testimony and what you've been through that we need to probe even a little bit further.
Yeah, for sure.
Once you're ready for it. And we basically outlined the whole sort of crime blueprint, okay, where they basically take
that's very important.
Split it into duality, bipolarity, and then sort of reverse polarize it, then making good, bad, bad, good, female, male, male, female. The way to basically decode it back on them is basically using reverse child psychology in the most simplest sort of sense. Okay, so we've established that crime blueprint that we see absolutely everywhere, and the identity hijacking. And we've basically explained more about the original Magyar affinity and why it was so important for the pervachy to completely annihilate it and wipe it out. Okay, because the Magyars actually laid claim to it all, you know.
Yeah, and that's what Franco Collins said for sure. He said the Magyars were one of the main claimants of everything, and he said that it went back to the year 1245, and the Vatican Jesuits, who are a continuation of the Sadducees, which means Satanists, they claimed the entire planet in 1245, and so wiping out the Magi was absolutely central to that modus operandi. And of course, most people don't realize that the word pervachy still goes back to Rome. That's something that many people are focused on different factions of the pervachy, which are actually lower tier. Like let's consider names like Scientology, Illuminati, Freemasons, or for example, Israel, the state of Israel. These are actually all subject to Rome, if I'm correct.
Well, that's right in a sense, and how basically.
And Rome and Switzerland. Switzerland is Rome.
Yeah. Well, okay. I'll basically refrain from commenting there, otherwise we'll go for another 2 hours.
Well, we'll save that for next time.
Because I have a lot to say on all of that, but basically, yeah, we've got this covered for this sort of third part of the journal, and we'll pick up again next time. I'll start explaining more of the ritual stuff that both I've remembered and worked out, and stuff that I've been told from a Montauk programmer who was basically the head of security at those rituals there, and he was not memory wiped. He was of the 2% not memory wiped. So he's got the clearest memories of everyone. I'm not going to mention his name ever. But
you were memory wiped.
Sorry?
You were memory wiped.
Yes, but despite the fact that I was memory wiped, I still do have memory.
Okay.
But I still have more memory to get back, because according to this Montauk programmer, I've been involved in so many secret projects and things that some things he's told me I still can't even remember, you know. Okay. And it's like it's a work in progress to basically undo all this memory wiping. Yeah. And the thing is that I'm doing really well as it is to have the memories that I've held on to, and the fact that I've learned how to do centered regression from the 90s onwards.
Yeah.
Okay, so the problem is that it's usually best when you do regression with someone who's acting as a connector to hold the space with you to help guide you through if you get a little bit stuck. But basically speaking, it's hard to find the right person to do the regression with that you can actually trust and who is competent enough to do it with you. Otherwise, there are ways I do find out information myself, many, many different centered ways. As I said before, I connect to the source directly through the appendix. I center through my appendix. And if you look at the function of an appendix in a book, the function is it's holding a list of records and annotations and everything like that. Well, that's what your appendix is. It's like a reset button for your fauna in your intestines and your gut and all the rest of it. But on an energetic level, it's connecting to the real Akashic records. It's not something in your fucking third eye.
Great stuff, man. Okay, well, I'm thanking you very much again for your 2 hours. I'm very appreciative.
And likewise, James.
Spending all this time to get some of this some of this unusual information on the record so that we can start moving forward as a species on this planet and stop getting
Absolutely.
bogged down in all of these non-human and subhuman behaviors and societies, because it's really time for us to either evolve and move on and become fully human again, or be sentenced to this prison planet condition perpetually.
Absolutely. And in following sort of journals, I will be actually releasing some names that two people, including this Montauk programmer who was on security at the door at the time, and another colleague I had that was a very good remote viewer, and he remote viewed the whole rituals, the manner, absolutely everything. He chased down a lot of the stuff that I was intuiting to make sure that I wasn't talking a whole heap of shit or not.
Okay.
And he was confirming a lot of my memories. And I'm sure if I got a whole team of remote viewers and I had the money to pay for it all, I'd be able to nail this down so much more quicker, because I do like to do this scientifically, in a soul scientific way, because what I want to do is line up all my information that I've got using the processes that I get information from, both from academic to sort of metaphysical sort of techniques, with other people that basically use academia and other sort of techniques to get information. And if all that information lines up independently, that's real science.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm feeling that.
So basically, although I know what I know to be 100% true, and I'm still working out more, I still want to basically put it through the scrutiny of other people basically independently coming up with that information too, or even finding out some things that I only just scraping the surface of, and they find even more information out.
Yeah, and I think that's what real original spiritual inquiry is supposed to be about, But the trouble is that anyone who goes after one of those paths ends up getting stuck in, a regimented interpretation of the cosmos, which then limits their
Absolutely.
own interpretations. Yeah. So did you get into all this regression stuff through this Claire Vision School and Samuel Sagan? I hadn't really looked much.
That is correct. And I was very lucky to, when I was doing the opening, the third eye workshops, it's almost like he just sensed that there were people in this class that were sort of advanced style souls or something, because he never usually takes beginner classes at all, He usually gets other people in the school to do that. But on this particular occasion, I was there from this opening the third eye sort of workshop weekend, where I kicked off from, I was doing a gig. Someone called me up to do a guitar gig with this woman who was singing jazz standards and playing double bass, for this situation at Government House building in town, where all we had to do was play some jazz and sort of, some other sort of, soft sort of jazz sort of funk tunes and stuff like that, as people were walking in and out of an exhibition, right? As one of these corporate sort of gigs that gives you a quick $150, $250, and you play for 15 minutes at the beginning and 15 minutes at the end, and your job's done. And this woman basically she said to me, you have an amazing way of playing guitar, in the sense that when you improvise, you're so free, it's just incredible. And I said, well, thank you, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then she said, I think you'd really enjoy this opening the third eye workshop that I'm involved with, that's coming up this weekend. Would you like to come? And I said, okay, I'll check it out. And so out of my curiosity and stuff like that, my gig money paid for the whole thing, and I got $10 change. She shortchanged me $50. But anyway, that's another story. But at the time, I wasn't living on much money, even though I was an avid professional at the time. But, that's just the life of a musician. And basically, what I learnt of Samuel Sagan from that weekend onwards, and when I went back on a few occasions on the weeknights and stuff like that, what I learnt and what I experienced was really quite incredible. And then at a certain stage, something in my gut went, hold it, you've learnt pretty much all that you need to learn from these people now. Now go off and scrutinise it on your own. And that's exactly what I did, because I didn't want to become part of the actual fraternity or group, so to speak.
Become a cult member kind of.
Because I'd already been studying metaphysics, and I found I was really disappointed in all the schools of metaphysics because nothing was resonating and making sense anywhere. And
it's all programmed.
Yeah, and so to find these breadcrumbs of truth in all sorts of strange places over the years in order to work out how to do centering properly, it's really been a really determined, you know, hardcore life's work.
Yeah, I can imagine. So that's something that we can go over on the next next recording.
Okay, then. Yep.
On the clear vision stuff.
Yeah, and how I basically took all of that stuff and then I realised, okay, there's some good techniques here, some very good techniques, but it's not all grounded properly. That's what I was basically picking up. And when I discovered centering, now I can use these techniques with having a solid root, like root in the soul, and not have to worry about getting manipulated or hijacked when I go into these realms.
Because the entire modern pervachy programmed Western culture is all about ungrounding us in a sense.
Oh, exactly. Exactly. It's just all the metaphysical sort of programmings for energy healers and shamans now, it's all watered down magi stuff. And not only that, it actually opens you up to being a tool for, you know, just look at Fuck Me on Jesus. It's a perfect fucking example.
Great stuff, man. Well, I very much look forward to speaking to you next time. So it'll probably be morning my time, evening your time today for you.
I'll upload this now for the others to listen to, and we'll pick up later on.
All right, mate. You have a good afternoon.
Yeah, you too, brother. Cheers.
Thanks, mate. Bye-bye.